The following is distributed by the Berean Call.
Welcome. You're listening to the audio version of the Berean Call newsletter for April 2026. I'm Rob Yardley, president of the Berean Call. Thank you for listening. I have written and will be reading this month's feature article titled Faithful Scribes, Part 2. Let a man so account of us as of the ministers of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 1-2. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, honest, just, pure, lovely, and of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. The 10 Commandments, except for keeping the Sabbath, are written in every human conscience. Most of us were caught in lies as children, and, quote, "Thou shalt not bear false witness," end quote, has been emphasized, sometimes with a well-deserved paddle, even to those of us not raised in Christian homes. We have stated that one of our purposes at the Berean Call is to preserve the writings of Dave Hunt and T.A. McMahon. We have no right to edit their writings to fit current sentiments or trends. Others are entrusted with a similar duty. One unfortunate example of quote-unquote preservation is the editing of Halley's Bible Handbook, HBH, by the officers of Halley's Bible Handbook, Inc. and Zondervan Publishers. The 24th edition of Halley's Bible Handbook was copyrighted in 1965, the year that Henry Halley died at age 91. Halley started his handbook as a 16-page pamphlet over 100 years ago in 1924, and it grew into an 860-page volume at the time of his death. Halley's writing style is characteristic of a bygone era. He used capitalization for emphasis, included rudimentary maps that are difficult to follow, and had only dark black and white photographs. HBH also reads like a small book that had data bolted on as the handbook was updated. Despite these shortcomings, the book had valuable content, and over 6 million copies were in print when Zondervan, who acquired publishing rights in 1960, decided to publish the 25th edition in the year 2000, 35 years after Henry Halley's death. Zondervan effectively updated the look by revising fonts and sentence structure, improving page layouts, securing superior photographs, maps, and charts, and enhancing the overall readability of Halley's Bible Handbook. If this were all they had done, they would have earned our commendation. Unfortunately, they did far more. Zondervan significantly changed Henry Halley's commentary on the Bible, fundamentally changed his recitation of church history, changed his chapter, quote, How We Got the Bible, end quote, promoting Zondervan's NIV in the process, added a section on, quote, basic Bible study tools, end quote, promoting Zondervan tools including study Bibles, concordances, Bible dictionary, Bible commentary, and Bible atlas, and even removed the entire chapter that Henry Halley titled, quote, The Most Important Thing in This Book, end quote. Halley's now eliminated opening sentence to this chapter said, quote, The most important thing in this book is this simple suggestion, that each church have a congregational plan of Bible reading and that the pastor's sermon be from the part of the Bible read the past week, thus connecting the pastor's preaching with the people's Bible reading, end quote. Also included in the 5-page, quote, most important, end quote, chapter is Halley's summation of his 48-page, quote, church history, end quote, chapter, which has been deleted from all updated versions since 2000. It contains this observation, quote, During the Dark Ages, the Church, under the domination of the popes for 500 years, 10th to 15th centuries, ruled the world with as despotic a hand as any earthly empire had ever done. Strange, is it not, that church supremacy and the Dark Ages were co-evil? The church, the light of the world, brought to the world midnight darkness. Why? Because the papacy suppressed all liberty and prohibited the circulation of the Bible among the people, even put people to death for reading the Bible. See pages 776 and 783. And in their infinite presumption, substituted papal decrees in place of God's Word. That is what made the Dark Ages, man's devilish impudence in exalting himself above God's Word." End quote. Zondervan also replaced Henry Halley's, quote, "church history," end quote, with, quote, "a brief history of the Western Church," end quote. While both sections are about the same length, the new, quote-unquote, history bears no resemblance to Halley's. In his history, Halley documents primarily the errors of the Roman Catholic Church, with pages 773 to 793 devoted to documenting the horrors of Rome. The deleted text includes, quote, "The 200 years between Popes Nicholas I and Gregory VII is called by historians the midnight of the Dark Ages. Bribery, corruption, immorality, and bloodshed make it just about the blackest chapter in the whole history of the Church." Pope John XII, 955 to 963, a grandson of Pope Sergius III's mistress Marozia, was, quote, "guilty of almost every crime, violated virgins and widows high and low, lived with his father's mistress, made the papal palace a brothel, was killed while in the act of adultery by the woman's enraged husband." End quote. The Bishop of Orleans, referring to Popes John XII, Leo VIII, and Boniface VII, called them, quote, "monsters of guilt, reeking in blood and filth, Antichrist sitting in the temple of God." End quote. Others bought the office of Pope with open bribery. This was called simony, that is, the purchase or sale of church office with money. In the period immediately following Pope Innocent III, the Inquisition did its most deadly work against the Albigenses. Later on, the Inquisition was the main agency in the papacy's effort to crush the Reformation. It is stated that in the 30 years between 1540 and 1570, no fewer than 900,000 Protestants were put to death in the Pope's war for the extermination of the Waldenses. Think of monks and priests in holy garments directing with heartless cruelty and inhuman brutality the work of torturing and burning alive innocent men and women, and doing it in the name of Christ by the direct order of the, quote, "vicar of Christ," end quote. The Inquisition was the most infamous and devilish thing in human history. It was devised by popes and used by them for 500 years to maintain their power. Rome's answer to the Lutheran secession, the Inquisition under the leadership of the Jesuits, an order founded by Ignatius Loyola, a Spaniard, on the principle of absolute and unconditional obedience to the Pope. Their supreme aim, the destruction of heresy, that is, thinking anything different from what the Pope said to think, for the accomplishment of which anything was justifiable: deception, immorality, vice, even murder. End quote. Perhaps Zondervan felt that this material was too direct to include. Henry Halley, on the other hand, begins his section on church history by stating, quote, "It is impossible to understand the present condition of Christendom except in the light of history. But alas, ignorance of church history is more widespread even than ignorance of the Bible. We believe it is the duty of ministers to teach their people the facts of church history." End quote. Zondervan and the officers of Halley's Bible Handbook, Inc. show a profound disrespect for Dr. Halley's concerns when they say in their single paragraph on the Counter-Reformation, quote, "The Roman Catholics developed new monastic orders, such as the Jesuits, who would spread Christianity to the Americas and even the Far East. They created a morals commission to clean up clerical excesses, reaffirm their theology at the Council of Trent, and also formed the Inquisition to persecute Protestants." End quote. They ignore the role of the Jesuits as described by Henry Halley, and that there are over 100 quote-unquote anathemas in the Council of Trent, dozens of which are targeted at Bible-believing Christians. And quote, "The Inquisition was formed to persecute Protestants?" End quote. Henry Halley, speaking of Protestant quote-unquote persecutions, said, quote, "All told, a few hundred martyrs may be charged against Protestants, but to Rome untold millions." End quote. After Halley's book sold over 6 million copies, his heirs and Zondervan are profiting off a misrepresentation of Henry Halley, ignoring his caveat quoted in the previous paragraph and misleading their readers. There is a silver lining. After I wrote about the above concerns and more, Stan Gundry of Zondervan replied in July of 2000, quote, "If you prefer an edition of HBH that is frozen in time as of the mid-1960s, that edition will remain in print as long as there is sufficient demand for it." End quote. The 24th edition of Halley's Bible Handbook, as edited by Henry Halley, is still available at the time of this newsletter. Henry Halley's 24th edition has a blue binding. The versions changed by Zondervan have a white binding, and some say, quote, "Classic Edition," end quote, which seems intentionally misleading. Like Henry Halley, John Foxe has had his name misappropriated. Foxe is best known as the author of the 1563 book Foxe's Book of Martyrs, which has the alternative title, A History of the Lives, Sufferings, and Triumphant Deaths of the Primitive Protestant Martyrs from the Introduction of Christianity to the latest periods of pagan, popish, and infidel persecutions. Foxe's Book of Martyrs is best known for its recounting of history and compilation of brief biographies of Christians killed by the Roman Catholic Church. In 2007, the organization Voice of the Martyrs published a volume titled Foxe, Voice of the Martyrs, with the authors listed as, quote, "John Foxe and the Voice of the Martyrs," end quote. Despite its name, the book Foxe, Voices of the Martyrs bears no resemblance to Foxe's Book of Martyrs. The modern book omits Foxe's history, with no mention of the Inquisition, of which Foxe said, quote, "In the space of 129 years, the Inquisition deprived Spain of 3 millions of inhabitants," end quote, a subject to which Foxe devoted an entire chapter. It also makes no mention of God sparing England from both the assault of the Spanish Armada and from the, quote, "conspiracy by the Papists," end quote, to blow up both houses of Parliament and the royal family, a conspiracy known as the Gunpowder Plot of 1605. These were the subject of another chapter by Foxe. When Foxe, Voices of the Martyrs, makes mention of persons from Foxe's Book of Martyrs, the writer removes most of Foxe's points. The book even includes at least a dozen Roman Catholics cited as martyrs. Foxe, Voices of the Martyrs, goes so far as to include a section on the Jesuits that begins with the paean, quote, "Founded by Ignatius of Loyola in 1540, the Jesuits have been the most successful missionary movement in the Catholic Church. Their achievements in education and scholarship are profound. In the United States alone, 19 universities are Jesuit-related," end quote. The real John Foxe, on the other hand, wrote the following in his preface to Foxe's Book of Martyrs, quote, "This is the religion, Roman Catholicism, to diffuse which strenuous efforts are now making in this country. Already the Papal Church numbers more than 500,000 of communicants. This number is rapidly augmenting by emigration from Catholic countries and by the conversion of Protestant children who are placed in their schools for instruction. The recent events in Europe will no doubt send to our shores hundreds of Jesuit priests, with a portion of that immense revenue which the Papal Church has hitherto enjoyed. Another thing which will no doubt favor their views is the disposition manifested among some who style themselves liberalists to aid Catholics in the erection of mass houses, colleges, convents, and theological seminaries. This has been done in numerous instances, and when a note of warning is raised by the true friends of civil and religious liberty, they are treated as bigots by those very men who are contributing of their substance to diffuse and foster the most intolerant system of bigotry and cruel, unrelenting despotism the world has ever seen. Other sects have persecuted during some periods of their history, but all now deny the right and reprobate the practice except Catholics. The right to destroy heretics is a fundamental article in the creed of the Papal Church. And wherever her power is not cramped, she still exercises that power to the destruction of all who oppose her unrighteous usurpation. All the blood shed by all other Christian sects is no more in comparison to that shed by the papacy than the short-lived flow of a feeble rill, raised by the passing tempest to the deep, overwhelming tide of a mighty river, which receives as tributaries the waters of 1,000 streams. We trust the present work, therefore, will prove a salutary check to the progress of that system, whose practical effects have ever been, and ever must be, licentiousness, cruelty, and blood." End quote. The author who penned this preface would not approve of his name being used to promote a book with opinions so contrary to his own. Voice of the Martyrs has also borrowed biographies from Foxe that do not use his name, publishing 2 books in conjunction with DC Talk, Jesus Freaks and Jesus Freaks Volume 2. In Jesus Freaks, the authors have biographies of individuals memorialized in Foxe's Book of Martyrs, including Anne Askew, Patrick Hamilton, Thomas Hawker, called quote-unquote Hawks by Foxe, John Huss, Nicholas Ridley, and William Tyndale, and do so while carefully avoiding any mention of the Roman Catholic Church. In Jesus Freaks Volume 2, the authors write the histories of John Wycliffe and Wendell Anuda, also without ever referencing the Roman Catholic Church. The book includes biographies of multiple Roman Catholics and ends with what it calls, quote, "a brief history of martyrdom and Christianity," end quote. That includes 3,200,000 Amerindian martyrs under the Spanish, 500,000 martyred in the witch trials, and 300 martyrs in the Spanish Inquisition. The books above seem to be willful misrepresentations. There are also errors in publications that may be oversights, at least on the part of the authors. For example, the map of the Exodus in the Schofield Study Bible shows no water crossing in the path of the Exodus. The map of, quote, "the Exodus from Egypt," end quote, in the Through the Bible Radio Network, J. Vernon McGee Bible, shows 3 potential, quote, "routes of the Red Sea crossing," end quote, all of which traverse a marsh north of the Red Sea, but not the Red Sea. The map of, quote, "the Exodus," end quote, in the Henry Morris Study Bible shows no water crossing in the path of the Exodus. The map, quote, "Exodus and Conquest of Canaan," end quote, in the MacArthur Study Bible shows the route of the Exodus crossing would appear to be distributaries of the Nile River, but no Red Sea crossing. This is noteworthy because C.I. Schofield, J. Vernon McGee, Henry M. Morris, and John MacArthur all believed in and taught about a Red Sea crossing as described in the Bible. It is likely that all had gifted proofreaders employed, yet somehow this obvious omission of the Red Sea crossing is incorporated in their study Bible maps. No man living knows the exact path of the Exodus, but those creating maps should surely include the Exodus's most significant event. For example, Rose Publishing makes a wall map of the Exodus with a plausible Red Sea crossing point, one in which the cartographer considered variables like the probable size and speed of the men, women, and children of Israel traveling with all of their goods and livestock, Exodus chapter 12, verses 36 to 37, the likely timing of the Egyptian pursuit, chapter 14, verses 5 to 9, a location where the Egyptians would consider the Israelites trapped, chapter 14, verse 3, and a location where crossing on dry ground would be a miracle, but drowning the Egyptian army would not. Chapter 14, verses 28 to 30. Whether Henry Halley, John Foxe, Dave Hunt, or any other author, it is wrong to change an author's writings without his permission, which can no longer be granted for the men cited. With the growing impact of artificial intelligence, AI, on all areas of our lives, we face insecurity over the accuracy and even the reality of what we hear, see, and read. May we at the Berean Call exercise our stewardship in the fear of the Lord, Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10, maintaining purity in safeguarding the resources entrusted to us.
Please visit our website, thebereancall.org, to access our radio archives going back to 1999 and our newsletter going back to 1986. We offer daily updates by email or visit us on Facebook or Twitter. Are you looking for information about a specific topic? Go to thebereancall.org and click on Topics at the top of the page. Our online store is thebereancall.com. We offer a wide variety of books, tracts, CDs, and DVDs. Note that most of our ebooks are free. I'm Gary Carmichael. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you can join us again next week. Until then, we encourage you to search the Scriptures 24/7.
Though none go with me, I still will follow. No turning back, no turning back.